The night we celebrated 40 years of my little shop, a young waitress leaned close to my ear. Her hands were shaking as she set down my coffee. "Sir," she whispered, "the people who threw you this party don't sign anything they give you tonight." I turned to look at her, but she was already walking away, fast, into the crowd. And what she said next, when I followed her into that kitchen, turned my blood to ice water. I'm truly grateful you're here with me today. Before we go any further, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. And when you reach the end, rate this story from 1 to 10. Your feedback tells me which stories to build next. One honest note before we begin. This story is a work of fiction. The voice you're hearing and the images you're seeing are AI-assisted. Names, places, and events are invented for storytelling. Any resemblance to real people is purely coincidental, but the lessons about family, trust, and quiet strength are very real. Now, let's begin. My name is Frank Dellsworth. I'm 66 years old, and for 40 years I ran a small engine repair shop on the corner of Waller and 3rd. Lawnmowers, outboard motors, generators, anything with a pull cord and a grudge. Before that, I spent 12 years in the Navy, fixing ship engines in rooms so loud you learn to read a man's lips. I learned something in those engine rooms that never left me. When a machine is about to fail, it tells you first. A half-second hesitation, a knock that shouldn't be there. You just have to be quiet enough to hear it. I was married to Rosa for 38 years. She kept the books for the shop. She kept me honest. She kept me whole. Rosa passed 11 months ago. A heart that simply stopped one Tuesday morning while she watered her tomatoes. The house got very quiet after that. Too quiet. And a quiet house is an easy place for the wrong people to move in. We had one daughter, Colette. 34 years old, sharp as a tack, married 3 years ago to a man named Bryce. Bryce sold financial products, or talked about selling them. He had soft hands and a firm handshake and a smile that never quite reached his eyes. Rosa never liked him. "That one's always doing math behind his face," she told me once. I told her she was being unfair. Rosa was almost never unfair. I should have listened. After Rosa died, Colette and Bryce came around more. At first, it felt like a mercy. Dinners, phone calls, Bryce fixing things around the house I could have fixed myself. And then, slowly, the conversation always turned to the same place. My money. The shop. The building I owned it in. The savings Rosa and I had scraped together one repair at a time. "Dad, you shouldn't have all this stress at your age," Colette would say. "Let Bryce manage it. He does this for a living." And I, lonely and hollowed out, started to nod. That was my first mistake. It would not be my last. The party was Bryce's idea. 40 years of the shop, he said. It deserved a real celebration. He rented the back room of a nice restaurant downtown. He invited people I barely knew, and a few I did. He hired a caterer, a bar, a photographer. He paid for all of it, which should have been my second warning. Bryce never paid for anything unless there was a return on it. The night of the party, I wore the suit I'd worn to Rosa's funeral. It was the only good one I owned. Colette hugged me at the door and told me I looked handsome. Bryce shook my hand with both of his, the way salesmen do. "Tonight's all about you, Frank," he said, and I almost believed him. The room was warm and loud and full of light. People made speeches about the old shop. Somebody told the story of the time I fixed the mayor's boat motor an hour before the county race. I laughed. I felt, for a moment, less alone than I had in months. And then, near the end of the night, a young waitress came to my table with a cup of coffee. She was maybe 25, tired eyes, a name tag that read Nadia. She set the cup down, and she leaned in close, and under the noise of the room, she whispered the words that changed everything. "Sir, the people who threw you this party, don't sign anything they give you tonight." My hand froze on the saucer. I looked up at her. "What did you say?" But she'd already straightened up, her face gone blank and professional. She glanced quickly toward the corner of the room. I followed her eyes. Bryce was standing there with two men in suits I didn't recognize. One of them held a leather folder. Bryce was looking at me, smiling. He raised his glass. Nadia was gone, back toward the kitchen, weaving between the tables. I sat there with my heart hammering. Then I stood, told the table I needed some air, and I followed her. The kitchen was all steam and clatter. Nadia was at a steel counter, stacking dirty plates, her back to me. "You said something to me out there," I said quietly. "I need you to tell me what you meant." She turned. She looked scared. "I could lose this job," she said. "You won't," I said. "You have my word. Please, what did you see?" She wiped her hands on her apron and glanced at the door. "I served drinks in the private room before the party started," she said. "Your daughter's husband was in there with two men. They had papers spread across the whole table. Legal papers." I heard him say, "Once your father signs the transfer tonight, the building and the accounts move over clean. He'll think it's a tax thing." My stomach turned to stone. "He said, the old man's grieving. He'll sign whatever we put in front of him if we tell him it protects the family." Nadia's voice dropped even lower. "And then one of the other men laughed and said, 'Sad how easy it is once the wife's gone.'" The words hit me like a wrench to the ribs. Once the wife's gone. They'd been waiting for Rosa to die. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. Nadia looked down. "My grandfather," she said. "2 years ago, a man in a suit talked him into signing his house into some trust, said it would protect it. Within a year, the house was gone and my grandfather was living in my mother's spare room. He died ashamed, like it was his fault." She met my eyes. "When I heard them laughing tonight, I saw my grandfather's face. I couldn't just carry the tray and say nothing." I reached out and squeezed her hand. "You're braver than you know," I said. "What's your grandfather's name?" "Jean," she said. "Jean Alvarez." I filed it away. "Those two men with Bryce," I said. "Do you know who they are?" "One's a lawyer," she said. "The other one? Your daughter's husband called him Mr. Reeves. Sloan Reeves. He runs some wealth advisory company. He's the one who put the whole thing together." Sloan Reeves. I said the name twice in my head the way you memorize a part number. "Thank you, Nadia," I said. "Go back to work. Act like we only talked about coffee. And don't worry, I'm not signing anything tonight." She nodded, and something eased in her face. I walked back out into that warm, bright room full of people celebrating me, and I saw all of it differently now. The party wasn't a gift. It was a trap with a bar and a photographer. Before I tell you what I did next, I need to ask you something. Type 1 in the comments if you think my daughter knew what her husband was planning. Type 2 if you believe she was in the dark. I need to know you're still with me. And a quick reminder, this story includes fictional details, and the voice and images are AI-assisted. If it isn't for you, no hard feelings if you step away now. But if you're staying, stay close. Because a Navy man learns patience in rooms full of noise. And I was about to get very, very patient. Bryce found me near the bar 20 minutes later. He had the leather folder under his arm and Sloan Reeves at his side. Reeves was tall, tanned, expensive. A watch that cost more than my truck. He shook my hand like we were old friends. "Frank, what an honor," he said. "Bryce talks about you constantly. A self-made man. They don't make them like you anymore." "That's kind," I said. Bryce set the folder on the bar and opened it, smooth and casual. "Dad, I hate to talk business at your own party," he said, "but Mr. Reeves went out of his way to be here tonight. He put together a protection plan for the shop and your savings. Just a signature or two and everything's shielded. Estate stuff, tax stuff. Boring, but important." He slid a pen across the bar, the same move my daughter made at my kitchen table, the same move Nadia had watched them rehearse in a private room. I looked at the pen, and I did the last thing they expected. I let my shoulders sag. I let my eyes go tired and a little lost. "Boys," I said, "my head's swimming. Too much wine, too many speeches. I can't read fine print tonight. My eyes aren't what they were." Reeves and Bryce exchanged the smallest glance. "Of course, Frank," Reeves said smoothly. "No rush at all. How about Bryce brings these by your house this week, when you're rested?" "That'd be better," I said. "I'm sorry. I'm just an old man who misses his wife tonight." And I watched something flicker across their faces. Relief. And under it, contempt. They thought the grief had finished me. They thought I was soft fruit, ready to fall. "Take all the time you need, Dad," Bryce said, patting my shoulder. "We just want to take care of you." "I know you do," I said. I even smiled. Colette drove me home that night. She talked the whole way about how well the party had gone. I made the right sounds, I nodded in the right places. But I was somewhere else entirely. I was back in an engine room, listening for the knock that shouldn't be there. And I could hear it now, loud and clear, coming from inside my own family. I did not sleep that night. I sat at Rosa's kitchen table where she used to do the books, and I pulled out every financial folder we owned. Bryce had been managing my accounts for 8 months. I'd let him. I'd signed the authorization the month after the funeral, when signing anything felt like too much. Now I read every statement by lamplight, slow and careful, the way I'd trace a fuel line looking for a leak. And I found the leak. Our main savings account. 2 years ago, it held $240,000. Rosa and I built it one carburetor at a time. Now, it held $61,000. The rest was gone. Not in one theft, that would have been too obvious. In pieces. 4,000 here, 9,000 there, 12. All small, all quiet, all routed to a company I'd never heard of. Reeves Wealth Strategies. Sloan Reeves, the man who'd shaken my hand at my own party. I set the statement down. I put my palms flat on Rosa's table. And I breathed. Slow. The way you breathe when a job's gone wrong and panic won't help you. Then I got a notepad and I started a list. Because a machine about to fail tells you first, and I had finally gotten quiet enough to hear it. I did not sleep the rest of that night. That's the part nobody warned you about. The stolen money is bad. The rewriting is worse. I lay in the dark, and my mind went back through 8 months, moment by moment, and turned every kindness into a con. Bryce fixing the gutter I could have fixed myself. Had that been help or access? The dinners, the phone calls, the gentle way Colette kept saying, "Let Bryce handle it." The perfume Rosa never got to smell, on a daughter-in-law I now understood had married my ruin without knowing it. The way the paperwork always arrived with the pen already out. How many of those warm moments had been real, and how many had been a machine running quietly with me as the fuel? That's the cruelty of it. They don't just take your savings, they take your memories, your trust in your own eyes. And a grieving man doesn't have much of either to spare. But somewhere in that long night, the grief burned down into something steadier, and engine room calm. I had spent 12 years staying level in rooms that could kill your hearing. I could stay level in this one, too. Let them think the old man was asleep. The next morning, I found Jean Alvarez. Nadia had given me the neighborhood. A phone book and 40 years in this town did the rest. He lived in his daughter's spare room, just like Nadia said. A thin man in his 70s, with careful eyes and a handshake still strong from a lifetime of work. We sat on the back porch, and I told him why I'd come. When I said the name Sloane Reeves, his whole face changed. "That man," Jean said quietly, "took everything I spent 50 years building." He told me the story. A wealth seminar at a community center, free coffee, a warm, patient advisor who never rushed him. Reeves had come to Jean 6 months after Jean's wife died. "He waits for the funerals," Jean said. "That's how he finds us. A man alone with a paid-off house is exactly what he's hunting." Reeves had moved Jean's home into a trust, promising protection. Within a year, the equity was drained, and the house was sold out from under him. "I signed every page myself," Jean said, his voice thick. "That's the part that kills you. My own signature. Nobody forced my hand. He made me feel like the smartest man in the room, right up until the room was empty." "How much?" I asked. $310,000, Jean said. "Gone. And I was too ashamed to tell anyone for a year." I looked at this proud man, hollowed out by the same wolf now circling my door. "Jean," I said, "would you be willing to say all this out loud, to the right people, if it meant stopping him?" Jean was quiet a long moment. Then he nodded, slow and certain. "I've been waiting 2 years for someone to ask me that," he said. Driving home, the picture came together, ugly and clear. Sloane Reeves wasn't a family tax advisor. He was a predator with a route. He found grieving people with money. Sometimes he came at them directly, like he did with Jean, and sometimes, when he was smart, he found a family member on the inside, someone with access, someone greedy, someone like Bryce. My son-in-law wasn't the mastermind. He was the door Reeves walked through. And my daughter. My daughter was the question I couldn't answer yet. Was Colette a partner? Or another tool like me? I didn't know. And until I did, I could not tip my hand to anyone. So I made a decision at a red light on 3rd Street. I would not call the police yet. Not with $61,000 and a waitress's whisper. Bryce controlled my accounts. He'd wipe the trail and call me a confused old man inside a day. No. I needed proof that doesn't cry and doesn't argue. I needed the whole machine mapped before I shut it down. Rosa used to say I loved a problem more than I loved a vacation. She wasn't wrong. And this was the biggest problem anyone had ever handed me. Before I brought anyone else in, I wanted to see the wolf hunt. There was a flyer Bryce had left on my counter weeks back, before I understood any of it. A free retirement seminar, coffee and pastries, a community hall 2 towns over. Reeves's name wasn't on it, just a company that traced back to him if you knew how to look. And I knew how to look now. So on a Thursday morning, I put on my oldest cardigan and my reading glasses, and I drove out there. The room was full, 40 people, maybe more. Every one of them my age or older. Widows with their good purses in their laps. Widowers in ironed shirts, sitting alone, hoping someone would speak to them. And there he was. Sloane Reeves, working the room like a shepherd through a flock. He was extraordinary. I'll give the devil that. He didn't sell a thing in the first hour. He listened. He crouched beside a woman's chair so he wasn't looming over her. He remembered a man's dead wife's name from a sign-in sheet and used it gently. and the man's eyes filled up. He made 50 lonely people feel for 90 minutes like somebody finally saw them. That was the con. He wasn't selling a trust. He was selling the one thing every grieving person is starving for: to be seen, to not be alone, to have someone competent carry the weight for a while. I sat in the back and watched him take a widow's hand in both of his, and I understood exactly how Jean had fallen, exactly how I nearly had. Near the end, he drifted toward me. "You look like a man carrying a lot, friend," he said, warm as sunlight. No recognition in his eyes at all, just another old shirt in a folding chair. "Can I get your name?" For one long second, everything in me wanted to stand up and end it right there. Instead, I gave him a shaky, foolish old man smile. "Just here for the coffee," I said. He patted my shoulder and moved on, already forgetting me. I drove home, understanding at last exactly what we were dealing with. Not a thief who happened to be charming. Charm itself, weaponized. And the only way to beat a man like that was to be the one thing he never bothered to check for. A quiet old man who used to listen for the sound a machine makes right before it dies. I called an old friend named Walt Bergen. Walt and I served together in the Navy, and after the service, he became a fraud investigator for an insurance company. Retired now, but the eyes never retire. I laid it all out for him at his kitchen table. The party, Nadia, Jean, the drained account, Reeves' wealth strategies. Walt listened without a word, the way he used to listen for a bad bearing. When I finished, he said one thing. "Frank, if that money crossed state lines, this isn't a family squabble. It's federal wire fraud." "Then let's prove it," I said. Over the next 2 weeks, Walt and I built the file. He pulled the corporate registry on Reeves' Wealth Strategies. A shell. Almost no real operations, just an account that money flowed into and vanished out of. He traced my missing funds through it and out to an offshore account in the Caribbean. And he found the others. Jean was not the only one. There were at least 4 more. Widows and widowers, all over 60, all recently bereaved, all missing between $200,000 and $400,000. Reeves had a pattern as clean as a factory line. Find the grief, find the money, find the door, drain it, move on. While Walt worked the money, I worked the harder question. Colette. I could not build a case against my own family without knowing where my daughter stood, so I invited her to lunch. Just the 2 of us. I played the tired, grateful father. I told her Bryce had mentioned some paperwork, and I supposed I was ready to let him handle everything, since I was getting on in years. I watched her face when I said it, and what I saw broke my heart and gave me hope at the same time. Colette looked uncomfortable. "Dad, are you sure?" she said. "I mean, Bryce says it's the smart move, but you love that shop. You built it. I don't want you to feel pushed." It wasn't the face of a mastermind. It was the face of a woman who trusted her husband and hadn't looked too closely at what he was doing. "Do you know what's in the papers, sweetheart?" I asked gently. "Bryce handles all that," she said. "He says I don't need to worry about the details." He says I don't need to worry about the details. There it was. My daughter wasn't a partner. She was another person Bryce had talked into not looking. Just like me. The relief nearly undid me right there at the table, but I kept my face calm, because now I had one more thing to protect. Not just my money. My daughter's marriage was a lie built on my ruin, and she didn't even know it yet. And I would have to be the one to show her. Walt knew a woman at the state's financial crimes unit, an investigator named Dana Poole who'd spent her career chasing men like Reeves. We brought her the file, the shell company, the offshore routing, Jean, the other 4 victims. She read it in silence, her jaw tightening with every page. "This is the cleanest elder fraud package I've ever been handed," she said. "But I want him admitting it, on tape. Paper is good. His own voice is better." "How do we get that?" I asked. "He thinks you're about to sign," Dana said. "So let him think it. We set a meeting. You wear a wire. You get him talking about what the papers really do, and you hand a jury his own words." "One-party consent state. It's legal. But Frank, I need you calm. You get emotional, he lawyers up, we lose it all." "I spent 12 years staying calm in rooms loud enough to kill your hearing," I said. "I can do calm." So I called Bryce. I told him I was ready, that I'd thought it over, and he was right, and I wanted to get the paperwork done before I lost my nerve. I heard the smile in his voice. "That's great, Dad. Mr. Reeves will be thrilled. Let's do it at his office Thursday." The night before, I barely slept. Not from fear this time, from focus. I sat at Rosa's table and I ran the whole thing through my mind like a route I was planning. Reeves would slide the folder across. He would smile. He would tell me it protected the family. And everything depended on my staying the harmless old man he believed in, right up until the moment I wasn't. If he saw one flicker of the man who'd mapped his entire operation, he'd smell it and lawyer up. So I decided what my old man wanted, the way an actor decides. He wanted to understand his own money. He wanted to not be a burden. He wanted it all to finally be over. I built the mask out of those wants while the sky went from black to gray. And I thought about Rosa. "That one's always doing math behind his face," she'd said about Bryce 3 years ago. She'd seen it in a night. It took me losing her to finally see it too. "I'm sorry, my love," I said to the empty kitchen. "You were right. I'm going to make it right." Thursday came gray and cold. Under my shirt, taped flat against my chest, a recorder ran. Walt sat in a car outside. Dana's people were 2 floors down. I stood in the parking garage for a moment before I went up, breathing slow, 4 counts in, 4 counts out. The way you steady your hands before a cut you can't take back. Then I walked into Sloane Reeves's glass office alone. Bryce was already there, relaxed, coffee in hand. Reeves stood to shake my hand, all warmth and teeth. "Frank, I'm so glad you came around. This is going to protect everything you built." He slid the folder across the desk, uncapped the pen. "Just a few signatures. This moves the shop and your accounts into a protective trust, shields it from taxes, from probate, from anything that could threaten the family." I looked at the pen, and I set it down. "Before I tell you what happened in that office, I need to know you're still with me. Type, 'Finish him' in the comments if you want to see this man face what he's earned. And one honest reminder. This next part includes fictional details, and the voice and images are AI-assisted. If it's not for you, step away now. But if you're staying, hold on. Because a quiet man had just stopped being quiet. Before I sign," I said, calm as still water, "I want to make sure I understand it. Humor an old man. This trust, once the shop and the accounts move into it, who controls them?" Reeves smiled. "The trust does, Frank, for your protection." "And who controls the trust?" "There's a managing entity. Bryce and I oversee it as your representatives. You'd retain a beneficial interest." "A beneficial interest," I repeated, "but not control." "It's just structure, Frank. Standard stuff." "Like the structure you set up for Jean Alvarez?" I said. The room went still. Reeves' smile didn't move, but something behind his eyes did. I don't know that name, he said. Sure you do, I said. Community center, free coffee, 6 months after his wife died, $310,000. A house sold out from under a proud old man. Bryce shifted in his chair. Dad, what is this? I kept my eyes on Reeves. And the 4 others, I said. Widows and widowers, all grieving, all drained, all routed through Reeves' wealth strategies to an account in the Caribbean. Same account my $61,000 went to. Reeves set down his coffee, slow. And here is the thing I'll never forget. As the mask came off, the corner of his mouth twitched upward, a small, hungry pull he couldn't quite hide. Because a man like Reeves doesn't feel fear the way you and I do. Even cornered, some sick part of him enjoyed the game. You've been busy for a man who fixes lawnmowers, he said softly. I fixed ship engines for 12 years before that, I said. I know the sound a thing makes right before it fails. You've been making it all night. Reeves leaned back. His voice dropped, cold and sharp. Let me tell you how this goes, old man. Every signature on every one of those files was given freely. Nobody held a pen. You think a jury believes a grieving widower over a licensed advisor with references and a wall full of plaques? I have your son-in-law. I have paperwork. You have a feeling and a dead wife. He smiled, ugly now. Grief makes people confused. Maybe you're just not well, Frank. Maybe that's the story. Maybe, I said. Let's find out. Bryce was pale. Reeves, shut up. Something's wrong. But it was already done. I raised my voice just slightly toward the door. I think that's everything I needed to hear. The door opened. Dana Poole walked in with 2 investigators and a warrant. Reeves's face finally broke. Bryce shot up from his chair, hands raised, already trying to save himself. I was manipulated, he blurted. This was all Reeves. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. Dana looked at him flatly. You'll get your chance to explain the transfers you authorized from your father-in-law's accounts. Bryce sat back down like his strings had been cut. And I stood in that glass office, the recorder still warm against my chest, and watched the machine finally seize. They walked Sloane Reeves out through the lobby of his own building, past the receptionist, past the wall of plaques he'd bragged about, past the framed photos of him shaking hands with people he'd probably robbed. I followed them down and stood by my truck in the cold morning air, a gas station coffee in my hand. As they put him in the car, he saw me. The old man who fixed lawnmowers, the easy mark, the grieving widower. I lifted my coffee cup an inch, just an inch, a quiet toast. And I watched the understanding land on his face, the way it lands on a man who realizes the machine he never bothered to inspect was the one that took him apart. I didn't smile. I just held his eyes until the door closed. Walt came up beside me, hands in his pockets. You all right, Frank? For the first time in 11 months, I said, I think I am. The case moved fast after that. The recording was everything Dana needed. Reeves's confession, his own voice naming the structure on top of the forensic trail Walt had built. Investigators pulled his offshore records and found what we already suspected. Not 5 victims, 11. Widows and widowers across 3 states, more than $2 million over nearly a decade. Sloane Reeves was charged with wire fraud, money laundering, and elder financial abuse. Gene Alvarez testified. So did 3 of the others. One by one, proud old people stood up in a courtroom and stopped being ashamed. Reeves was sentenced to 19 years in federal prison. The offshore accounts were seized. A victims fund was set up. Most of the money was gone for good, but some of it came home, enough to matter. Bryce pleaded guilty to a lesser charge. His lawyers argued he'd been recruited and manipulated by Reeves, which was true. But he'd authorized the transfers from my accounts with his own hand, which was also true. He was sentenced to 4 years. The hardest part was not the courtroom. The hardest part was my daughter. I sat Colette down at Rosa's kitchen table, the same table where I'd found the leak, and I showed her everything. The statements, the offshore trail, the recording of her husband explaining how easy I'd be to fool because I was grieving. I watched my daughter's world come apart. She listened to Bryce's voice call her father a mark. She heard him say the thing about her mother. Sad how easy it is once the wife's gone. And she put her face in her hands and wept. "I brought him into our family," she said. "I helped him plan a party that was a trap. Dad, I didn't know. I swear on Mom, I didn't know." "I know you didn't," I said. "That's why you're sitting at this table instead of across a courtroom." "He told me not to worry about the details," she whispered. "And I didn't. I just trusted him." "That's not a crime, sweetheart," I said. "That's just the oldest mistake there is. Trusting the wrong person because loving them felt easier than looking closely." "I made the same mistake. I signed the authorization the month after your mother died. He fooled us both." Colette was quiet a long time, tears falling onto Rosa's table. "Mom never liked him," she finally said. "She tried to tell me, in her way, and I got angry at her for it." "Your mother saw people clearly," I said. "It was her gift and her curse. She'd have wanted you to forgive yourself, not carry this." "How do you forgive yourself for helping someone rob your own father?" "You don't do it all at once," I said. "You do it the way you fix anything worth fixing. One honest day at a time. And you let the people who love you help you carry it until you can." She looked up at me. "You still love me? After all this?" The question broke something in my chest. "Colette," I said, "you are the last piece of your mother left in this world. There is nothing you could do that would make me stop. You weren't the wolf. You were just another person he fooled. And you're home now." She came around the table and put her arms around me, the way she used to when she was small and the world had scared her. And for the first time in 11 months, in that quiet house, I didn't feel alone. Colette filed for divorce before Bryce was even sentenced. She moved back into her old room for a while, and the house had a voice in it again. Not the voice I'd lost. Nothing replaces that. But a warm one. A true one. Nadia, the waitress, changed everything the night she found the courage to whisper over a coffee cup. I tracked her down to thank her properly. I learned she was working 2 jobs to finish a nursing degree, so I did the only thing that felt right. I paid off the rest of her tuition. Every cent. She cried and told me she couldn't accept it. I told her she'd already saved a man's life with a whisper, and the least I could do was help her save a few more with a degree. She sends me a photo every semester of her grades. I keep them on Rosa's refrigerator. Jean Alvarez and I have coffee every week now. 2 old men who lost their wives and nearly lost everything else to the same wolf. He got a small check from the Victims Fund, not what he lost, but something. More than that, he got his voice back. He stood in a courtroom and told the truth, and I watched years of shame lift off his shoulders as he did it. The people who show up are your family. Nadia showed up with a tray and a warning. Jean showed up with the truth. Walt showed up with 40 years of friendship and a fraud investigator's eyes. And my daughter, in the end, showed up too. Wiser and sadder, and still mine. Blood didn't save me. The people who chose to be brave did. If you've stayed with me all the way to here, let me say one last thing. I'm 66 years old, a widower, a grandfather someday, I hope, a man who fixes small engines. And I nearly lost everything, not to a stranger, but to the family I let stop watching me. So hear this from an old man who almost signed. If someone is very eager to manage your money, if the paperwork always comes with a pen already uncapped, if they tell you not to worry about the details, listen to the voice in your gut that says something is wrong. Look at your accounts. Actually, look. Ask the questions that feel rude, because the people who prey on the grieving are counting on your politeness and your shame and your loneliness. Take that away from them. And if you're already where I was, betrayed and cornered and grieving all at once, hear this most of all. You are not too old. You are not too tired. You are not too broken to fight back. I was 66 and half asleep at my own kitchen table, and I took it all back, because a young woman was brave enough to whisper, and I was quiet enough at last to listen. Be that person for someone if you get the chance. And if you're the one being warned, be brave enough to hear it. If this story moved you, leave a comment and tell me, have you ever been warned by a stranger? Have you ever found family in a place you never expected? Someone scrolling tonight needs to read your story. And remember what I asked you at the start. Rate this story from 1 to 10 so I know which stories to build next. If it meant something to you, give it a like. It helps this story reach another grieving parent, another lonely widow, another family with a wolf already at the gate. Share it with someone you love. And if you want more stories about ordinary people who refused to be written off, subscribe and stay with me. This channel is called The Quiet Father for a reason. The loudest man in the room is almost never the strongest. Sometimes, the strongest thing a father can do is stay quiet, stay patient, and refuse to lose. Thank you for walking this journey with me all the way to the end. One last honest note, the same one I gave you at the beginning. This story is a work of fiction. The voice you heard and the images you saw were AI-assisted. The names, places, and events were invented for storytelling. Any resemblance to real people is purely coincidental. But the lessons about grief, about trust, and about the people who choose to be brave for us, those are as real as anything I know. I'm Frank Dellsworth, and I'm finally, quietly, free.